In 1943, battle-hardened Royal Air Force pilots stared at the new contraptions bolted to the wings of their Hawker Typhoon fighters. They were crude, heavy, and looked more like industrial plumbing than weapons of war. The pilots' mission? To take this unproven aircraft, which already had a nasty reputation as a death trap, and hunt the most feared armored vehicles on the planet, Hitler's Panzers. You could feel the skepticism. They called the rockets flying telegraph poles, a desperate, wild gimmick. But just 1 year later, in the hedgerows of Normandy, German panzer crews would come to fear the whistling sound from the skies more than anything else. It was the sound that came before a storm of fire and steel that didn't just destroy tanks, it broke them. This is the story of how a simple, crude weapon mounted on a deeply flawed fighter became the psychological terror of Germany's toughest divisions and a key weapon in the battle for France. By 1943, the German war machine, though stretched thin, still seemed unstoppable on the battlefield. Their names alone, Panther, Tiger, were the stuff of legend. These weren't just tanks, they were rolling fortresses with thick, sloped armor that shrugged off standard Allied anti-tank rounds. For a British infantryman, using the standard-issue Piat anti-tank weapon required getting dangerously close, and even then it was a long shot against the frontal armor of these behemoths. Towed anti-tank guns were powerful, but they were slow to set up and sitting ducks for enemy artillery. The tools they had for air-to-ground attack weren't cutting it either. The Hawker Hurricane, which had been a decent tank buster in North Africa, now found its 40mm cannons bouncing off the improved armor of Germany's newer tanks. A solution was needed, and fast. The entire plan for the invasion of Europe depended on stopping any German armored counterattack cold. Without a way to kill panzers, any beachhead could be overrun and pushed back into the sea. German strategy was built around the armored counterpunch. Let the enemy land, take the first hit, and then unleash a massive, lightning-fast concentration of tanks to crush them. To beat this, the Allies couldn't just fight tank for tank on the ground. They needed a weapon that could strike with shocking speed and force from an unexpected direction. They needed something that could stop a panzer division in its tracks, create chaos, and shatter the very idea of the blitzkrieg. The problem was, in 1943, that weapon didn't exist. The stage was set for a desperate gamble, an experiment born of pure necessity.
The aircraft chosen for this job wasn't exactly a champion. It was the Hawker Typhoon. From the very beginning, the Typhoon was a troubled machine. Rushed into service in late 1941 to fight the new Focke-Wulf FW-190, it was riddled with crippling problems. Its massive 24-cylinder Napier Sabre engine was an engineering marvel, but was also notoriously unreliable and loved to catch fire. Worse, the Typhoon was haunted by a terrifying early flaw. The entire tail assembly could sometimes just shear off in flight with no warning. During its first 9 months, it was said more Typhoon pilots were killed by their own planes than by the enemy. Pilots weren't just afraid of the enemy, they were afraid of their own aircraft. It was a brute, huge, powerful, and incredibly fast down low, but it was a handful, earning a grim reputation as a death trap. And it was on to this flawed hero that the RAF decided to bolt its new weapon, the RP-3. The Rocket Projectile 3-inch, or RP-3 for short. If the Typhoon was a brute, the RP-3 was its club. The design was brutally simple, a 3-inch steel tube packed with cordite propellant attached to a big, heavy warhead. No guidance system, no fancy electronics. It was basically an oversized firework with a 60-pound high explosive or armor-piercing head. They were mounted on steel rails, 4 under each wing, adding a ton of weight and drag that slowed the Typhoon down. Initial testing was not great. The rockets were wildly inaccurate. A crosswind, a slight change in the plane's speed, or the G-forces of a dive could send them way off target. Hitting something as small as a tank took incredible skill and a healthy dose of luck. Pilots had to dive steeply toward the ground, right into the thick of enemy flak, and let their rockets go at the perfect moment. Fire too early, they'd fly over. Too late, they'd fall short. It was a weapon that demanded absolute precision at the exact moment when everything on the ground was trying to kill you. In October 1943, No. 181 Squadron was the first to use the new combo for real. The results were mixed, and it took time for pilots to get the hang of it. The Luftwaffe mocked the British rockets, calling them inaccurate propaganda. To them, it was a weapon of desperation, not precision. But this desperate gamble was about to be unleashed on Normandy, where its power would be measured not just in tanks destroyed, but in the sheer terror it caused.
When the Allies landed in Normandy on June 6, 1944, the Typhoon and its rockets were ready. 18 squadrons of rocket-equipped Typhoons were a core part of the Royal Air Force's 2nd Tactical Air Force, a unit fine-tuned by Air Marshal Sir Arthur Conyngham, who had mastered air-ground tactics in the North African desert. One of the most brilliant new tactics was the cab rank system. Flights of Typhoons would circle high above the battlefield, like taxis waiting for a fare. On the ground, embedded with the troops, were RAF radio operators and armored cars called forward air controllers. When they spotted a column of German tanks or a strong point holding up the advance, the controller would mark the target with colored smoke and radio the coordinates to the circling Typhoons. A fighter-bomber would peel off, dive on the target, fire its rockets, and then zip back to a forward landing strip in Normandy to rearm and refuel, while another plane took its place in the sky. This cut down response times from hours to just minutes, giving the Army a flying artillery battery on call, 24/7. The effect was devastating. German forces, who were used to moving freely behind their own lines, were now under constant threat from the sky. A German NCO from the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, Werner Josupeit, described the horror. The fighter-bombers circled our tanks several times. Then one broke out of the circle, sought its target, and fired. A second pulled out and fired, and so they continued until they had all fired. Black clouds of smoke from burning oil climbed into the sky everywhere we looked. They marked the dead panzers. On June 10, 1944, this new power was shown with chilling results. Allied intelligence found the headquarters of Panzer Group West, the command in charge of the entire German armored counteroffensive, at the Chateau de la Cane. In a perfectly coordinated strike, RAF bombers and rocket-firing Typhoons hit the headquarters. The Germans were caught completely by surprise. 18 staff officers, including the Chief of Staff, were killed, and the commander, General Leo Geyr von Schweppenburg, was wounded. Their communications gear was obliterated. The planned Panzer counterattack was thrown into total chaos, postponed, and finally canceled. The Typhoon had just decapitated the German armored command at the most critical moment. But the rocket's true power wasn't just in its explosive force, it was psychological. Post-battle analysis showed something strange. During Operation Goodwood in July 1944, Typhoon pilots claimed they destroyed over 200 tanks, but when researchers checked the battlefield, they could only confirm 10 tank kills by rockets. Similarly, in the fight around Mortain, investigators looked at 43 wrecked German tanks and found only a few were knocked out by rockets.
So, if they weren't all that accurate, why were German commanders so terrified of them? The answer is the sheer, overwhelming violence of a rocket attack. The rockets didn't just explode, they shrieked. A German army report noted that while the chance of a direct hit was slim, the crew's first thought would be of the disaster if a hit was obtained. When a 60-pound warhead did hit a tank, it was catastrophic, often ripping the turret clean off or causing the whole thing to explode. But even near misses would shower the tank with dirt and shrapnel, deafening the crew and filling the tight space with the terrifying sound of impacts. The sight of multiple Typhoons rolling in, one after another, each firing 8 rockets, created a storm of fire, smoke, and noise that was just unbearable. Panzer crews, even in perfectly good tanks, would often panic, abandon their vehicles, and run for their lives. The fear of being cooked alive in a steel box became more powerful than the weapon's actual kill rate. This terror hit its peak during the German counterattack at Mortain in early August 1944. Hitler himself ordered an all-out armored assault to break the American lines and split the Allied armies. The attack started under the cover of thick morning fog, but when the fog lifted around noon, the Typhoons came out to play. What followed was an aerial assault so relentless it's been called the Day of the Typhoon. For 8 hours, RAF Typhoons flew hundreds of missions, pouncing on the German columns. Though pilot claims of 84 tanks destroyed were again an overestimate, the constant attacks completely paralyzed the German advance. Pinned down, unable to move without attracting a rocket strike, the armored spearhead was stopped and then shattered. As one captured German commander put it, "Your fighter bombers simply nailed us to the ground." The final act came later that August, in the nightmare of the Falaise Pocket. As the German 7th Army tried to escape being surrounded, they got jammed on crowded roads, creating a perfect shooting gallery for air power. Typhoons and other Allied fighter bombers descended, turning the escape routes into a graveyard of broken vehicles and shattered divisions. While later analysis showed artillery did most of the damage, the Typhoons were the catalyst, creating the panic that sealed the pocket and turned a retreat into a rout. The myth of the invincible Panzer was finally broken, not by a better tank, but by a flawed fighter with a crude rocket.
By the end of the Battle of Normandy, the Hawker Typhoon had secured its legacy. It came at a high cost. During the campaign, the Typhoon force lost 151 pilots and 274 aircraft, mostly to intense ground fire. But their sacrifice was decisive. The Tiffy and its rockets had become more than just a tank killer. They were a doctrine killer. The whole point of the German blitzkrieg was fast, concentrated armored movement. The Typhoon took that away. It forced German units to scatter, to move only at night, and to waste precious resources on flak guns. It created so much fear that German commanders often blamed air attacks for most of their tank losses, even when it wasn't true, a testament to the weapon's massive psychological impact. The famous catchphrase among German soldiers in Normandy summed it up perfectly. If the aircraft above us are camouflaged, they are British. If they are silver, they are American. And if they aren't there at all, they are German. The RP-3 rocket was not a miracle weapon. It was inaccurate and demanded incredible skill and bravery from the pilots. Its success was the product of a whole system: the rugged Typhoon airframe, the brilliant cab rank tactics, and the courage of the forward air controllers on the ground. But more than anything, it was a weapon that proved fear itself can be a weapon. The sight of those flying telegraph poles screaming out of the sky did more than destroy armor. It destroyed morale. It broke the will of the men inside the machines. From a flawed interceptor to the scourge of the Panzers, the Typhoon's story is one of redemption. The crude rocket that pilots once distrusted had turned a troubled fighter into a psychological terror, a weapon that didn't just win battles, but changed how the war on the ground was fought. The story of the Typhoon is a fascinating chapter in military history. If you enjoy stories about the technology and tactics of World War II, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. And let us know in the comments what other imperfect heroes of the war you'd like to see us cover.